Hi everyone, I'm Areanna, so I'll be delivering the training today. I'll give us another minute, it looks like, to kind of let everyone get on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we have the 10 participants, so I can start a little bit early. So I will share my screen with you, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview. So I'll do my presentation, and then if you want to use the question and answer function throughout it, Carrie will be checking in on things and saving the questions for the end, and then we'll kind of go over it all after the presentation. Let me just share quickly. So I'm going to be talking about customer service engagement. I'm a patient experience coordinator at Prevea, but I'll kind of give you a little bit more about that. This presentation is really based on that front desk role, so we would refer to them as our patient service representatives, kind of looking as the front face of your organization, or those people who have the first contact with the patient. So I'm going to give you a little bit about Prevea and where I work and how I help our employees in this way. So our mission is to take care of people with passion, pride, and respect. And then through that mission, our vision is to be the best place to get care and the best place to give care. So we're looking at it from that employee perspective and then also that patient perspective, knowing that both of them need to be happy and functioning well together in order to be that best place to get care. And then a little bit of what I'll be talking about today and how we achieve our mission and vision is making sure that we're listening to our patients, we're understanding their needs, we're sharing ourselves as an organization, but then also offering patients that opportunity to share their best self and who they are, and then also recognizing when things go right, when things go wrong, and how we can do things the best way for the patients. So a little bit about myself. I've been at Prevea for almost 3 years in the patient experience coordinator role. I do all of our new employee training. I go out and shadow physicians and clinic staff and work with our process improvement advisor, manager to help, fix things that might not be going well with the clinic, looking at it from that patient perspective, using all of our survey data. So I manage all of our patient surveys, which is where we get a lot of information to see what roles might be not performing as well, or where we might need to focus, and then going and providing targeted help to them. So just a little bit about what we'll be talking about, the patient experience. So why that front desk or why that front person is so important, how to set the tone in a lot of meetings. So when you're interacting with a patient, whether it's in person or on the phone, there's a lot that goes into that. The art of listening, and then navigating some of those challenging encounters is an area that we'll be focusing on as well. So thinking about why the front desk really matters, or why that patient service representative really matters. So thinking in healthcare, how can this be so crucial? And so, some of these I had set up when we were going to be live doing it, but this can kind of be a self-reflection time for you as that front desk role. So why do we think that that's so important and crucial? And kind of thinking about it, at least in our clinic, they're kind of the go-to person for a lot of different areas. So if staff needs something, they're going to ask that front desk person. If a provider or physician needs something, they're reaching out to them. The patients are reaching out to them. They're often that first contact when they come and have a question. And so thinking about those different aspects and how, they're expected to wear a lot of different hats, or, be able to manage a lot of different areas. So we kind of refer to ourselves as caregivers. So everyone, we're a caregiving team. We're here providing care for the patient, and we think about it as everyone is a part of that team. So regardless if you're at the front desk, if you're a part of the nursing staff or a physician or provider, we're all part of that caregiving team. And our job is to alleviate that patient suffering. So I'm not sure when you guys think about it, but if I'm coming into a provider's office, am I in my best self? So if I'm a patient, am I providing that best self that I am? So typically when we're seeing patients, they're either stressed because they're coming in for an appointment, or they might be nervous. They might be coming in there for something that they don't want to be coming in for. So they might not be feeling well and they're hoping to feel better. So just thinking about those different dynamics and how can we help alleviate that? So if we notice that a patient is extra stressed or anxious, can we generate some conversation with them, try to help alleviate, that inherent suffering that they're going through? And then you're often the first point of contact. So you're that first impression. So you're what they're getting. And then thinking about why or how important that first impression is. And then one of the main access points to ensure appropriate care. So I know every clinic is set up a little bit differently, but sometimes you might be the main person at a certain clinic, or you might be transferring to other areas of your organization. So it's kind of on you to understand what those patient needs are, and then transfer them or get them to that appropriate person, or make sure that you can get them scheduled to see more about, what you can get for them, and make sure that their needs are met. And then you're then collectors of important data. So you're collecting a lot of important information. So you're getting all those touch points. So if a patient's coming in and saying, they've been experiencing pain, or they are having X, Y, and Z issues, it's kind of on that front desk person to make sure that they're documenting that, getting that information, so that the nursing staff and the provider can help best prepare for that appointment. So thinking about a first impression, so you guys can think about this with me. So I had my first impression with you. What kind of information do we get from that first impression? So we don't know anything about them personally. Do we know, what kind of car they drive, what kind of music they like? Do they have children? It's hard to build that relationship when we don't have any of these more personal aspects. But we do know a little bit about them, and it's kind of on us to get that information. And so I'm not telling you guys that you have to go and ask them, what kind of pet they drive, or what kind of pet they have, or if they have a car, or, how they're getting there. But what are some things that we can do when a patient's coming in to build that good first impression and kind of ease them into the clinic, make them feel welcome? Are we asking them how their day is? Sometimes if it's in the morning, people ask what they're doing in the afternoon. If it's in the afternoon, they'll ask how their mornings went. If they're coming from work, or different things that they might be doing. So thinking about how we can build those relationships. And then, depending on your clinic and, how frequently you may be seeing patients, something that we, encourage staff to do is always greeting them by name. And then you might be learning more about them. So if you see them coming in with children, or if you see them coming in with a significant other, there might be these different things that then we can grow and build on and keep continuing that relationship. I know one of the things that I see in a lot of patient comments is, I love talking to Areanna because she remembers all of our children's names and we've been going to her for 5 years. And so me being in that front desk role, they'll comment on that and they like that consistency. They like that friendly face and it makes them feel welcome when they come in. And that's something that we really see in our comments that is important to our patients. So elements of a positive first impression. So there's a lot of things that go into that first interpretation. So what do I look like? What do I say? What do I sound like? And how do I listen? So a lot of the time we're just collecting that information. I said we were those data collectors. So what does that look like and how am I doing that? And I know a lot of us in our roles are having the computer in front of us, or we're taking that information and typing it in automatically. And the thing that I can say to do that is probably one of the most important things is always explaining to the patient what you're doing as you're entering things in. So, if I'm not looking at them, to the patient, that could mean that I'm ignoring them or they don't necessarily understand that. And sometimes some of the feedback that we see is, I wasn't sure what they were doing, so I wasn't sure if they were focusing on me or just entering other information in. So if we can always walk our patients through what we're doing, this helps us build that good first impression. So what do I look and sound like? So first impressions are made in less than 10 seconds. So people hear you or people see you first and then they hear you second. So if I am looking away or talking to a colleague, or if I'm not even at my desk, that's the first thing that we're seeing. And so thinking about what that looks like, how can I be most approachable? How can I make sure that my setting is set up appropriately, that I can see when patients are walking in, and then making sure that I'm able to greet them. So a little bit about setting the tone. I'll kind of talk about this as an in-person situation and then also on the phone, since I know that that's one of the things that a lot of us have to deal with, especially now during COVID and some of the additional things that have been moved to more of a virtual or phone setting. So we would say it's all about communication, and it's not just what you say. So I'm talking right now, but it's so much more. I'm a very big hand talker, so you can see my body language. But it's also the tone of my voice and the words that I'm using. So what kind of words am I using to explain things to patients or go over different things? Are they words that anyone can understand? Are they words that only, am I using larger words or smaller words? Making sure that it's appropriate for the patient in front of me. And then the tone of my voice. So can they hear the stress in my voice? Sometimes we hear that too. I could tell that they were really anxious, or I could tell that they were really busy and seemed rushed. So is that coming off in my tone? And then also my body language. So am I turned away from them? Am I turned towards them? Am I looking at them? Am I open to conversation? So what does that look like from the patient's perspective? And then it's how you say it. So it's my facial expression. So do I have a frown? Am I furrowing my brows? What am I doing that's sending a message to them that could, be negative? Some people are not smilers, or they give off other, feedback with their eyes, I guess I'll say. Some people, or some shadowing experiences that I've noticed, and then I talk about it with them later and they're like, I had no idea that I do that. So sometimes there's things that we do that we have no idea, and it's nice to just get that third party perspective. So asking a colleague, is there anything you notice when I greet patients? Is, how did you feel like that went? And then, making sure it's a good open interaction with each other, that you can give and receive honest feedback. And then verbal cues and posture and position. So as much as this is important for us to be aware of that we're doing to our patients, it's good to understand how our patients are coming in. So what does their body language look like? What does their tone look like? What kind of words are they using? And then reading their facial expressions and verbal cues. And this is just as important as it is for the front desk as it is at every step in the appointment. So this is something that we think is really important for any type of communication that you're having. So what do I say? Things that we would really, really stress is saying please, thank you, you're welcome, excuse me, I'm sorry. Anytime you can use the patient's name, it helps tailor it. So one of our survey questions looks at new medical history, and what that looks at is really, when we did a targeted research, is patients want to feel like the clinic knows them, like they're a part of that clinic and that they're coming in to see someone and have built that relationship. And one of the things that helps with that is using the patient's name. It's making them feel welcome. So good morning, Areanna. We're happy to have you here to see, provider so-and-so. Carrie Johnson will say, It looks like you're being seen for X, Y, and Z. And then as we're updating information, so can you show me your insurance card, Areanna? We just need to make sure that we have that all up to date. Anytime that you can use it. And I'm not saying you have to use it in every sentence, but anytime that you can kind of fit that into the conversation, a greeting and a closing, you know, thanks for checking in. If you want to go have a seat, the doctor will call you when they're ready. Thanks again, Areanna. Or anytime that you can kind of throw it in there. Helps a patient at least feel more tailored, that visit was tailored to them and not just something that you're doing every day or monotonous. And then saying it with a smile, using proper grammar, no slang or jargon. So one of the things that I try really hard to do is, that's kind of ingrained in our head, is, as I've said it in here, we call our front desk staff PSRs, so patient service representatives. But then we also have different terms that we'll use that are very specific to Prevea, I'll say. So that's what I would consider jargon. So if you call, you know, your front desk something, or if you call a certain area something that might not be widely used in other clinic settings, patients might not know what you were saying. I was just shadowing yesterday and someone said, okay, we'll just take them downstairs. Well, we were on level 2 of the building, so there's, you know, 2 more levels and then a basement. So did that patient really know what downstairs meant? And so thinking about, you know, these different directions or different things that we might be doing, how are we saying that and what does that look like? And then try not to use terms of endearment. So sometimes these might be, I'll say, reassuring to us. So we might like it if someone calls us dear, or, you know, something along those lines, but we really try not to. Patients can sometimes feel like that's patronizing, or, you know, that we're talking down to them. And so things that we would steer away from are those terms of endearment. And then tone communicates the emotion behind your words, not just the content. So if I am talking in an aggressive or angry tone, that's going to come off. And so if I'm starting to get frustrated with a patient, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that's going to be, you know, displayed to our patient. So maintain calm, relax your voice, pay attention to the volume and then the cadence. So how fast am I talking? Especially now when we're all wearing masks, it's a lot harder to hear through them. And also for our patients who might be hard of hearing or who might, you know, not be able to process on some of those faster levels that we're talking. I am inherently a fast talker. And so this is something I need to work on, is looking at that cadence and making sure that our volume matches that. And then also looking for those body cues from our patients, where can we see that they're hearing us and do they seem to understand what we're asking? And then also being aware of our emotions. So I very much tell staff that if they need to take, you know, some time to themselves, a few minutes to compose themselves, maybe they just had a pretty difficult interaction, or, you know, are feeling a little overwhelmed and stressed, I would much rather have them take a few minutes to themselves and kind of recollect themselves than try to force through it and then have a lot of negative interactions after that. So, you know, making sure that your emotions are, we'll say, in check, and then also making sure that the patient's emotions are in check. So are there things that we might need to look for with them to start de-escalating that situation? And then the art of listening. So the word listen contains the same letters as silent, which I think is really impactful here. So when we think about patients, they're coming in and it's our job to get as much information as them to make sure that we're making the right health decisions for them. And so if they're not giving us that information that we need, or if we're missing out on something, that is where we need to focus. And so anytime that we can listen to the patient, make sure that we're getting that information is good. One of the hardest things for me is silence. So I would say that for me, when I'm working on this, it's okay to have those awkward periods, because that's where you're going to get the most information from patients. I'm not saying that you have to wait it out and kind of have a, an awkward standoff, but making sure that we're listening, letting the patient get out the information that they need to, and then moving on when it's appropriate. So active listening is focusing fully on the speaker, showing verbal and nonverbal signs of listening, and then listening with all your senses. So often, a lot of times we are going to be behind a desk, so they can't always see us. We're not getting all that, physical, nonverbal information. But again, like I'll mention, if you're typing and entering information in, there might be a computer screen here, there might be another counter in front of you, making sure that you're looking up to still engage with the patient, thinking about the words, thinking about that cadence, and then your body language. So I'm giving all of this off to them. So if I'm entering information or if I'm waiting for something on my system, how does that come off to the patient and what does that look like? And then, you know, noticing if patients are coming up behind them. So sometimes we have lines and waits. How are we dealing with that and trying to remain calm and not give off those different, you know, signs to the patient. So being present in the moment. I'm sure all of us have at some point thought about something else while we're on the job, and that's okay, and that's what we need. But if I have a patient in front of me, I need to think about that and, you know, addressing all those needs. And so trying to just be as present as possible with them. So not thinking about these other things about, you know, did I remember to lock the door when I left this morning? Or, you know, are they backed up and back? Is there something I need to be doing? And then also being present and thinking about, okay, so here's my situation, here's my setting, how can I address this patient and take care of their needs? And if you are getting busy and kind of backed up, making sure that you're setting those expectations with the patient. So addressing all of that and, you know, letting them know so that the patient can then, you know, have realistic expectations for that as situation as well. So verbal signs of active listening, so questioning, so asking relevant questions for greater understanding. This reinforces your interest in what is being said. So if the patient's giving you information, this, you know, asking them questions or verifying information is a good way to show them that you did understand what they said and now you're responding. Paraphrase to show comprehension. Clarification, so summarize and seek feedback to ensure accuracy of the speaker's message. So this can be with patients, whether it's, you know, when you're checking them in or interacting with them. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult patient and you're seeking to resolve an issue. This shows them that you're understanding the issue and what's happening, and then showing them that you're going to go and help try to resolve it. So summarizing and feedback to ensure accuracy of that message is really good to clarify what's going to happen next. Also looking at your body language. So this is looking at those nonverbal signs of active listening. So being open and relaxed, lean forward, tilt or nod your head, mirror their position, focus on your tone of voice. So if I'm behind the desk and taking information or looking at something, or if I'm out talking to a patient, you know, in the clinic, what does my body language look to them? Can I nod? Can I show agreement? You know, doing these different positions and facial expressions. So having that relaxed face, smile when appropriate, avoid those frowning and grimacing. So sometimes for a lot of us, it's hard to hide those initial reactions. So if a patient says something that might be traumatic or, you know, disheartening, or, you know, something that would typically lead to a reaction, how do we, I don't want to say avoid those, but how do we try to make it not so apparent? Because in your line of work, you're probably dealing with a lot of different patients and thinking about how we can have the best reaction in those situations. And then eye contact as much as possible when you can and when it's appropriate. So I'm not saying that you have to awkwardly stare, you know, at a patient the entire time, but how does that feel natural in a conversation? And then combine this with your facial expressions. So phone etiquette. I've done this a lot of times where I'll nod along on the phone, but I have to think about what can people see and what does this look like? So they can't see you, so my voice and tone is very crucial. So words that I think help in these conversations are, yes, I'm happy to do that. Definitely, absolutely, my pleasure. Silence can be a little dangerous on the phone. You know, sometimes you might just be updating the patient with what you're doing. So never let it more than a few seconds go without saying something, because the patient's kind of on the other line wondering, you know, did they hang up on me? Did we lose connection? Am I getting put on hold? You know, what's going on? So even if it's just to recap what you're doing. So I'm waiting right now, I'm entering in your information. I've updated everything and now I'm just moving on to the next slide. I'll be typing, you might hear this in the background. And so letting them know kind of what you're doing. Okay, I'm entering in your insurance, or I'm doing this. I'm sending a message to the nurse to see if someone is available to talk to you. Whatever kind of that next step is, let them know. And I kind of want you guys to reflect on this for a second and say, do we ever say, oh, this computer system's so slow, or oh, the phones are taking forever to go through, oh, they're so busy? You know, are these things that we communicate when there is silence? And what message do you think that that sends to the patient? So if I hear, oh, this computer system's so slow, what am I thinking? So am I thinking, oh, do they have, you know, updated information? Do they have, you know, the best technology? You know, what are they working on? And so then they start questioning or asking different things regarding that. and what face-to-face looks like. So things that we need to be aware of when we're in person versus on the phone. So I would say, or at least our standard is to greet every patient, even if it's only with eye contact and a smile or a nod, when they're 15 to 20 feet from you. So if I'm working with someone here and I notice that someone else comes in, I can kind of look at them, smile, wave, nod, let them know that I see them, but I'm currently working with this patient, and then continue on with that patient. So there's a lot of things that we have to be aware of in our clinic settings, but it's letting that patient know, okay, I'm aware of you, I'm going to finish up with this patient, and then once I'm done, you'll be getting that direct attention. Always stop conversations and pause work when patients approach. So that patient in front of you is who wins. So if I am currently on the phone, I can finish up with that patient, but letting that patient in front of me know and acknowledge them. So saying something to the person on the phone with, can you hold on 1 second? Hi, I'm just finishing up with this patient. I'll be with you in a moment. And then finish up with the patient on the phone. And then I'm not telling you to hang up on the phone, but if a person's in front of you, letting that phone possibly ring or answering it, asking them if they can be on hold, and then putting them on hold. Your organizations might have more specific guidelines, but this is kind of what we've chosen to do at Prevea. So in our field, we're saying that that person in front of us is who we want to address first, and then ask the people who are calling in on the phone to be put on hold. We also have a few staff who are helping out. So if I'm helping a person on the phone, my colleague might take this person that's coming up in person, and we might switch back and forth. So we try to really help each other out, even if it's not our specific area. So always stop conversations and pause that work. That's also if I'm having conversations with colleagues or coworkers, or say a nurse is behind me or a provider. If we're talking about something, we want to still give that patient that acknowledgement. So if that is information that you need to get, or if that's something that's happening, maybe try to find them later, but we want that patient who's in front of us to get that information as soon as possible, and to get them, to be able to get care right away. So now looking at some kind of challenging encounters, and I want you guys to definitely think about this when you're looking at the comment or the question and answer section if you have questions on this. So how soon is soon? So this is something that we do in our new employee orientation, because everyone has a different answer to this. So if I were to say, someone will be with you soon, what time frame comes to that? And I always put parameters on it, because I don't want you to think about something as 10 to 15 minutes. I don't want that time frame. I want one specific number. And so when we do this in person, we see some new employees say, 2 minutes. And then we see some say 30 minutes, or some see an hour. And so soon depends to you on what the situation is. So am I waiting in a doctor's office? Am I waiting for test results? Am I waiting for a callback? Am I in the exam room and I'm gowned and I'm ready to be seen? What does soon feel like to you? And I will also say, I have them sometimes set a timer for a minute and feel what a minute is like. And when you're sitting in an exam room by yourself, a minute feels like 5 minutes. And so that's something that we really have talked about with our staff, because when we're thinking about it, we're like, a minute is nothing. But to a patient, if they don't have a time or a clock or anything to tell them, sometimes those 5 minutes where they're in between seeing someone can feel like an eternity. So just make sure that we're setting that expectation and letting them know, okay, a provider will be in with you in 10 minutes, or someone will be with you, we want to avoid shortly or soon. Because if that patient is thinking soon is less than 5 minutes, and we know that someone's not going to be in there for 15, then that's setting an unrealistic expectation that we're already not going to manage. And so just thinking about what that means to you and how we can try to avoid that. So I want you guys to think about, have you ever waited in a doctor's office and what that felt like to you? And then try to put that in your perspective when you're talking to patients. And then what aggravated you most? So when I see comments, I see patients commenting on, it felt like it was forever. No one came to update me. If you knew you were behind, you should have let us know. And that's where that communication is so crucial. So getting that information from back in the clinic area up to the front desk, or the front desk back to the clinic area. So I was shadowing yesterday, and we had a patient who showed up an hour and a half early. So, they were kind of talking about, she let them know, were we able to work them in? All the other patients were there, what kind of appointment it was. And we were having this conversation because that patient's ride, that was the only time that they could come there. And so that's what they needed to, that's what they needed to do to get to their appointment. And so how can we try to make them as comfortable as possible while still trying to address their care and needs? So just thinking about those different situations and what we would want from the patient perspective, and reminding ourselves that that's what we need to try to give to the patient. Because sometimes I think we get very used to that clinic setting, and not that we make excuses for each other, but we know everything that's going on behind the scenes, where our patients have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. So we know that they might be backed up, or we know that, you know, someone might be dealing with a stressful day, or personal things might be coming into play, but the patients have no idea that's going on. So how do we make sure that we're still trying to provide that best level of care? So I want you guys to think about a scenario. So you notice a patient has been waiting for 15 minutes and has not been taken from the waiting room yet. What would you typically do? And so just kind of thinking about that scenario and what you would do. We would encourage staff to go and check on the patient, see if there's anything else that you can do, see if they need water, a bathroom, anything that you can offer them. We would also want our staff to be checking in the back and seeing if they're running behind, because if they're running behind, that's something that we would want to be telling patients who we're checking in, but then we also want to be able to provide updates to that patient. So our goal is to be updating patients every 10 to 15 minutes. And obviously, given the current, time frame of stuff, we understand that there's other different cleaning and processes to be going on, but our goal or our standard is to update patients at a max of every 15 minutes on what the status is for their care. So one difficult area is, and I'm not sure if this is something you guys have to deal with, but asking for payments or asking for funds. Some people have copays, some people might not have insurance, depending on what your clinic policy is. So we would say ask how and not would. So how would you like to pay for today's appointment? Make eye contact, listen, be aware of the surroundings. So if you have a really long line of people backed up, making sure that there's distance. This can be an awkward conversation for people. They might not have the funds, they might not understand or be able to pay at that moment. So how are we, preparing that patient, handling that? And we don't want them to also have to experience all the other patients in the waiting room hearing and experiencing that. So understanding how they might feel in that moment. And also I'll say our tone and how we're asking. So, hi, Mrs. Jones, how would you like to pay for your appointment today is very different than how would you like to pay for your appointment today? So thinking about these different situations and how that comes off. So a patient with $100 cash required presents for their appointment. How would you ask for this patient? So again, hi, Mrs. Jones, we notice that you have $100 cash required for appointments. How would you like to pay for this today? And then waiting for their response. Are they able to pay for it? Are they not? And how do you handle those situations? So setting yourself up for these appointments and knowing these interactions might be happening is how we would like you to kind of think about your day. So I know that I'm going to have to be asking for payment, or if this is something that you don't have to deal with, that's great. And this might not be a difficult situation that you have to deal with. So I hear, and I try really hard to have people not say this at Prevea, and this is something we talk about too at our new employee, is that patient or one of those patients, or they're a difficult patient. So I'm putting quotations around this, because I think we often label a lot of patients this way when they're really not that difficult. And so looking at how to make it easy, or how to make a maybe hard situation easier for yourself, and what do we do when we have these types of patients? So a difficult patient might be someone who's saying, I want it now, I don't like this, well, can I just do it later? Or they think they know better. So they're vague or shifting in complaints. They might have a lot of concerns about minor symptoms. They could be hostile, demanding, and dissatisfied. Unrealistic expectations of treatment. They may raise new problems at every visit. They're resistant to the provider's recommendations. They're difficult to communicate with. They might be rambling or unfocused, or they could be self-destructive. And so these are just a few situations that we see. But we often label these patients as difficult without knowing their background. So thinking about your types of patients that you're seeing, how do we try to put ourselves in their shoes and think about how they're coming into this? So someone who might be rambling and unfocused might have a lot of different things going on, and they're coming from work, they're trying to navigate childcare, they're trying to do all these different things. They might be a single parent. They might be unemployed. You know, there's all these different things that they might be stressed and trying to adapt to, and how can we try to make this an easier situation for them and understand where they're coming from and meeting them at their level. So a principle for dealing with challenging patients or challenging patient encounters is reason rather than feeling must direct our behavior. So how can I put my feelings aside for how I feel? So if I'm getting frustrated, how can I put that aside and look to best help this patient and what they need, and focus on that reason and focus on that end goal as opposed to how I might be feeling in that moment, which I understand is very hard, and I will certainly say that, but it's something that we can do, and it's something that we need to do as a person who's providing care, because they're coming to us for a service. And when we think about places that we go for a service, we need to we expect a high level of care and respect, and we need to make sure that that's what we're always giving to our patients. So a little bit about emotional intelligence, and this is something I think you guys can check in on with yourselves as you're going as self-reflection later, and think about where you're at on some of these dimensions. So where is my self-awareness at? How is my ability to read emotions and recognize my impact? And so if I don't have a lot of self-awareness, maybe that's something I want to work on. So if I don't notice that those patients are getting frustrated later in line, I'm just focused on that person in front of me, maybe that's something that I want to work on or use as a goal that I'm going to set for myself. How am I able to self-manage? So my ability to control my emotions and impulses. So if I know that a certain kind of patient might trigger me, how can I help prepare myself before that patient comes in to give them the best experience? So how can I better manage myself? Do I work on taking deeper breaths? Do I work on maybe trying to refocus myself? You know, what are things that I can do to make that a better situation? Social awareness, so ability to sense, understand, and react to others' emotions. So am I noticing if this patient is really stressed or anxious or scared, nervous? You know, am I able to pick up on those social cues and then address my emotions to match and try to help them? And then relationship management, so my ability to inspire, influence, develop others while managing conflict. So when I'm having those difficult situations, how am I able to navigate through them? And maybe, I don't know if we're always able to inspire our patients, but I'm able to influence and develop a relationship with them where we can get to a resolution. So how can I help that happen? And I understand that we're not going to be able to resolve every issue that comes into our clinic or every negative patient experience. We're not going to be able to have 100%, but how many can we try to impact so that that at least decreases? So awareness is key. So asking yourself and taking that time, who or what triggers me? So what can I do to help myself be in a better situation? So you guys know your patients best, you know the type of clientele that you serve, and who do I notice that might be triggering me? So if it's a patient that always comes in and they bring their 3 kids and they're always running around the waiting room and they're disrupting other patients, you know, how do I deal with that and how do I set myself up? So if I know that they're coming in today, how can I try to make myself a better version of me and give them the best care that I can? Is there different things that I can ask of them? Is there different things that we can do? You know, maybe we get some coloring books or something in there in the waiting room so that they can have it. Is there other things that I can offer to that patient to get them the best situation? And do I have a personal bias that may exacerbate challenging patient encounters? So what about myself might make me frustrated with that patient? So is there something that I need to work on that's preventing me from providing the best care to that patient? And this is a time where I would say really checking in with coworkers or colleagues. I think having someone shadow or just watch some interactions is really important in this area, because we might not know things that we do. And so when I did new employee orientation, I found out, so I cross my arms a lot. So I'm basically standing in front of staff for roughly 3 hours. We take little breaks throughout it. But sometimes when I'm listening to them or hearing stuff, I'll cross my arms. And to me, I wasn't necessarily thinking about this, but that was something that I did to them, and they were taking that as me being closed off or disengaged. And so when someone gave me that feedback, I was like, oh my gosh, that was not my intent at all. So sometimes there's different things that we're doing that we might not be aware of. And so I think anyone can benefit from shadow or just getting some of that feedback, or listening to your patients. If you do have any types of surveys or feedback that you get from patients, having those check-in times, I think is really important. And so how do I act? How do I feel around a patient? I believe is being difficult. So what already starts triggering me? So if I feel or if I heard, I think this is sometimes too, oh, I heard this is a really difficult patient. So that's already putting me in the mindset of this is going to be a negative interaction. And how do I change that mindset to make it better? So if I think this patient's going to be difficult, maybe my job is to say, you want to know what, I'm going to make this the best encounter by being overly friendly, by trying to smile, by trying to get to know them. So asking them about their day, asking them about what they have going on, do they have weekend plans? Is there anything that's happening? Trying to make it better. And that might be how I position myself. And so do I let my emotions, so that anger, frustration, defensiveness, guide my response? And so if there's something triggering, maybe I would say I'm more of a type A person. So maybe someone who's not type A or who's more scattered or disorganized might frustrate me. And so if someone comes in and they have, 6 different planners that they have out or this many different things, and they're said, oh, hold on, let me check here. Well, let me check here. Maybe that's going to be a trigger for me. And how do I try to let that not trigger? So how can I try to be helpful in that situation? So saying, okay, we're going to look to schedule. Do you want to take some minutes? Do you want to take a few minutes to kind of come back together on that? And then when you have a good date and time, why don't you come back up to the front desk and we can try to figure it out there? Or why don't you stop back at the end of your appointment after you've had some time to look over things, and then we can try to schedule something. So what can I do that might typically frustrate me or hold up other patients? How can we look at that situation and make it a little bit better for the future? And then tips for successfully navigating challenging encounters. So take a minute to center yourself, recognize your emotions, identify the emotions of the patient, and then reframe your response. So if I already kind of have how I want to address the situation in my mind, and then I have a patient who maybe starts crying in front of me, I'm going to need to rethink about how I'm doing my response, because that might not be the normal reaction that I get. And so how can I adjust on the fly and be accommodating to that patient? Acknowledge the patient's feelings. So if this were me, I think I would feel really frustrated. Is this how you're feeling? Or I understand that this can be a really frustrating time for you. I would be frustrated in this situation, or I think I would feel frustrated. How are you feeling? Is there things that I can do for you? Validating that patient. So you have been dealing with headaches for a long time. This is a lot for anyone to cope with. I understand you're frustrated. Let's work on getting you scheduled as soon as we can. So validating that patient's feelings and emotions is a lot of the time what they're looking for in those, kind of difficult situations or frustrating situations. They want to feel like they're heard and that you understand their concern. And then aligning it. So I want to do everything in my power to help reduce your pain. Let me see what I can do for you today. So sometimes patients might be calling in with saying they need to be seen immediately. You might need to go check with nurses or other staff. You might not be able to make that decision. So how do you help align in what you're hearing with getting their care plan on track? And so letting the patient know what you need to do, and then setting that game plan and laying that all out for them so that they understand it. And then setting the tone for the interaction. So sit still, speak slow, remain calm. As a patient continues to escalate, so as you hear them getting, more frustrated, more angry, emotional, if you start matching them, it's just going to keep going on and on. So thinking about what that looks like and how we can help remain calm. And again, like I said, if you need to take a minute and kind of, I don't want to say that you can just ignore the patient in front of you, but thinking about what you need to do if you need to go and, seek other situations or, ask a colleague for something. You can tell the patient, you want to know what, I need to go and look into how we can help better address the situation. You can go in the back, maybe take a few minutes, come back out and rework on that situation with the patient. And then create collaboration. So using words like we and us, avoiding, signaling them out or singling yourself out. So we can work on getting you scheduled today. Why don't I help you get your schedule together? Thinking about how we can, make it seem like this is a collaborative experience for the patient and for you. So that's kind of all I have today. If we want to have some time for question and answer, or if we want to try to do, if there's an area that you guys had more questions on, I'm happy to expand on anything. Also thinking about if you wanted to do any type of role playing, if you guys had questions for me, I can think of different scenarios and go into that. So I'm happy to just be a resource. My contact information is here. I believe all my slides were available for you on the kind of virtual board. So that's all there. But any questions at this time? I saw some things popping up during.
Yep, so we'll just take a couple minutes here to allow people to type their questions in. You can answer, or you can submit your questions in the question and answer box. And if you don't see that on your screen, there's 3 dots. And if you kind of hover over those dots, you'll have some options that pop up. So you can click on the question and answer. Also, if you're more comfortable using the chat feature, some people are, you can hit all panelists. That's who you'd want to select it to, all panelists, so everybody can see it. Then you can type your message and hit enter. And I will read both options, so whichever you feel comfortable using. We do have a couple questions already, so I'll go ahead and ask Areanna, and she can provide the answers for them. Areanna, the first question is, in this era of COVID, where toys and busy items are not in the waiting rooms, have you any recommendations to keep children busy and engaged while their caretaker has an appointment?
There you go. I guess my first question would be, is the staff expected to be watching the child during this time? And we have like pens and papers available, and currently right now our practice is to have like a clean pen area and a dirty pen area. And so I would say that we can use some of those pens that we have and give the children, something to write on. Our staff typically aren't watching any of the children, but they might provide some of those, little things as options. Our areas are also a little bit more spread out. So we've taken a lot of chairs out of there to create that social distancing. And so we have encouraged, maybe patients want to like walk kind of around to keep kids distracted. I know staff we have different pictures. So I know staff had said, can you find a like elephant for me if one of the pictures has an elephant, or can you find this for me? And these are things that we already had on the wall. If there's a window, you could ask them, different things like that. So I would say kind of more of those, like search and find type that aren't giving them something specifically, if you guys had to take all those out. But we've also given like printer paper and one of our like pens that staff would sign, or patients would sign with from our clean bin, and then give the child that and then put it in the dirty pen when they're done.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Second question, do you have any suggestions for increasing customer service during a time while we are wearing, physical barriers, face masks, face shields, etc.?
It is extremely difficult. And I was in clinic all yesterday shadowing. And one of the things, I'm not wearing my badge right now, but one of the things that I really liked was a staff showed the badge because they can't see their face. So he said, hi, I'm Dr. Johnson. It had like a better picture of him. He's like, this is what I look like normally, and kind of laughed at it. He said, I know that I look differently now. I'm going to try to overemphasize, and he kind of just talked about it and said, I'm going to try to overemphasize some of my emotions to get that from you. And he's like, and then he also mentioned, I'm not getting those normal facial expressions that I would be getting from you. So I need you to help me during this visit and say things that you might not normally say. And then he would check in a lot more with the patient. And so he would say, he would go over a, treatment plan or talk to that. And then, say, does that make sense to you, or does this seem okay? And so I think if you're in that front desk setting, making sure if you do have a name tag or something like that. I've also seen people put like little smiley faces on there, or, like a little post-it or something that says like, I'm smiling under my mask, it's nice to meet you. These different things that you could maybe put like a sign at the front desk if that's what you had. I think addressing the situation is the best thing that we can do. So saying, I understand that it's really hard wearing these masks. It's harder to hear and see things. If you need me to repeat anything, please let me know. If you're unable to hear me, please let me know. Just making it, kind of taking away from being that elephant in the room, and something that we're trying to recognize is how we're currently handling it.
Thank you. The next question is, do you recommend providing patients with a summary of expectations for the visit while they're still on the phone, so that basically to handle a difficult situation that might emerge?
I love that idea. I think that any time that we can set the expectations for the patient is best. So when I am coming in for an appointment or when I'm scheduling, I think letting a patient know, how to what to expect. So what we were doing a little bit, and our front desk staff were doing this, was calling patients ahead of time, because we were changing procedures or policies a lot. So sometimes you were having to check in before you even got in, get masked, get your temperature taken, you know, walking them through all those things. For our surgeries, we're having to require COVID testing for some of them. So we are always trying to set those expectations. And so we might be having touch points with patients 2 or 3 times before they're actually coming into the office. And some patients, I will say, get frustrated with it. So they feel like we're over communicating. Other patients are really appreciative of it. And I'm seeing that a lot in our comments, or they're calling in, they're saying, I was happy to know that I'm going to have to wait extra. I was happy to know that there is less, you know, space to sit in the office, and you're trying to room people faster. So anytime I think that you can set those expectations for patients, especially if we know that they're a difficult patient and might be frustrated. We also have had to not see patients because they're not compliant. So they're not, you know, wearing the mask or doing that. And that's something we decided as an organization that we wanted to do. So we've had some of those negative things, and then we've kind of put in place how we're going to handle it if those are happening. So de-escalation is something that we're working on and trying to train staff on. So if a patient is starting to get frustrated, you know, making sure we're removing them or getting them out of like a very public place to have those conversations with them already helps de-escalate that. So I think, you know, communicating to the patient, like I said, some might be frustrated, but overall what we've seen is they're very appreciative.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One more question. Have you found that certain types of waiting room materials help to ease a patient's wait time? So like a TV or internet access, magazines, things like that.
Yeah, so I've seen this on a scale of all different kinds. So I see, and we made the decision a couple years ago to take out magazines from our waiting rooms, which was a really big frustration for our patients. But we were doing it from more of like a cleanliness type of perspective a few years ago. And so we saw a lot of frustrations with that. We added TVs. They could change the channels if they wanted to. They could ask the front desk staff for that. We have just kind of like different informational advertising things running on it about what's happening. Some of the waiting rooms have an actual TV where they can change the channel. I think those can be helpful. We do have Wi-Fi available, and I think we just have like a general kind of like patient one that they can get on. We also have added a lot of chargers. So some of our appointments and some of our testing areas, patients could be waiting for, you know, they could be the caregivers and they could be waiting for the patient in the waiting room for up to 3 or 4 hours for some of the testing. And we've actually put charging stations into some of our waiting rooms, depending on the length of visits. So that's something that we've seen patients have been very happy with. So we would see a lot of cell phones regarding that. Patients are frustrated that they don't have magazines or like crosswords or something to do. So I think that if your organization is comfortable with providing those, that you could definitely use them. We did see a lot of frustration when we took that out, but we had made that decision just on like a cleanliness factor. And especially with COVID and different times like this, we took a lot of stuff out. And I would say patients are frustrated, but they're also like, we encourage them to bring a book or something to read in the waiting room. So maybe encouraging patients to do something like that is something we started doing once we took magazines out.
Excellent, thank you. How do you feel about texting clients versus phone calls for appointment reminders?
You just went through a really big, I smile because you just went through a really big organizational change with this, and we have seen it on all aspects. So we went from calling patients for reminders to only doing text or email, and patients have the ability to change that. So if I don't want to receive any texts or emails, I can be removed from that, but then I'm not getting any appointment reminders. And for our elderly population, they were very, very frustrated with this. Our younger populations, if they have a lot of people that they're managing care for, they appreciated the phone call. We've also seen patients very happy with the texting clients. So I would like texting them and giving them reminders, and the fact that they have the ability to decide if they want that. So I can pick if I want an email, I can pick if I want a text, and then it also offers you the ability to just add that directly to your calendar. So if I get a text message from it, I can hit add to calendar, and then I'll get that reminder, or I'll get that appointment right on my in my calendar if that's something I do. So we've seen a lot of appreciation for that switch, but then also some of those pockets of patients, clientele that I mentioned, were frustrated with it. So I would say that it's been an overall good move for us, because a lot of patients would also get frustrated with the calls and they wouldn't like it, and it was too hard for us to navigate who wanted them and who doesn't want them.
Thank you. That was our last question, but we do have 9 more minutes of this session, so we'll just kind of hold on for another minute in case anybody wants to ask a question. Feel free to type it in the question and answer box or use the chat feature. Remember, when you use the chat feature, to address it to all panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add too is if there's something that I didn't touch on, or if you have questions in these last remaining minutes, I'm happy to address anything. Otherwise, I'm bummed that I didn't get to present with you guys live, because it is kind of fun to be able to hear your interactions and get feedback as we're going. So if there's anything that you want addressed that I didn't touch on, or any questions that you might have regarding just patient experience in general, I'm happy to answer any of those.
Thank you. And I'll also add that we would love for people to complete evaluations, because we're very curious if the virtual platform versus being in person is made a big significant difference to you. Okay, we don't have any other questions. So Areanna, I will just thank you for your time today and for all the content you've worked so hard to present for us, and say goodbye.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. And again, I gave my contact information. If there was something you didn't feel comfortable addressing, or if you have, scenarios or something that's really relevant to your area, I'm always happy to be a resource. So don't hesitate to reach out to me by email or phone. I would say email is probably the easiest, just because I do a lot of shadowing and rotation. So I'm not always able to call you back, but I'm happy to set up a time to kind of work with you further. So I'm happy to be a resource in any way. And thank you guys for joining.
Thank you.